Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and welcome to our live expert panel webinar today on the crystal ball of HR, looking to the future of culture, hiring, and remote work in the aftermath of COVID-19. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your host today. About 3 weeks ago, we held a webinar on this topic, so I'll make sure to send out the recording and corresponding infographic to our audience today. But today, we're going to do things a little different when we're talking about this topic. We've invited experts from around the world to give their take on what is a fluid, ever-changing environment post-COVID-19. Specifically, we have 5 questions that we'll go through. My role today is to field the questions from the audience and insert them where necessary, and also answer those questions in our Q&A session at the end of our session today. For the last 15 minutes, those questions can be entered into the GoToWebinar questions queue in your GoToWebinar control panel. As the economy opens back up in the aftermath of COVID-19, there's no doubt that this is a challenging time for our companies and our cultures. So we're helping out in a few ways. As Humantelligence clients begin to embark on their post-COVID-19 strategies, many have remeasured their cultures and have found that it's much different than before the pandemic. So we're helping those clients understand their current cultures, set target cultures based on performance or remote work, and using their culture to help attract and identify people who are going to thrive going forward in their organizations. So specifically, we're offering everyone on today's webinar that same opportunity via a 60-day trial of Humantelligence. That offer will go through the end of the week this week. For those of you on today's webinar, it's going to drop to 30 days starting next week. So in the trial, you'll get access to our culture assessment, culture analytics, and management module, talent fit. You'll also get the extension for Gmail, calendar, LinkedIn, Slack, website integration, engagement suite, and a number of other things that you'll get access to through that trial. I'll put the link in the chat so you can learn more and sign up. So look in your chat box here once I'm done talking, and I'll put some links to a couple of different items. So we've built, like I mentioned before, we've built a webinar talking about a lot of the content that we've talked through the last couple of webinars. So I'll make sure to send that link out as well, and in the follow-up email. So we've also developed a remote work scorecard. So you can go to remoteworkscorecard.com and create a free personal or team account up to 10 people. Take the 12-minute self-assessment, measuring behaviors, motivators, and ideal work environment, which we call the BMW framework. And that'll give you a remote work scorecard that gives you an overall score of 0 to 100. It'll provide you with information on your strengths, find opportunities for improvement, and give tailored feedback to help you perform better in a remote environment. So go check that out. I'll put a link to that as well, but it's remoteworkscorecard.com. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our panel moderator for today, Humantelligence co-founder, Carrie Leidick. So Carrie, I'll hand things off to you here.
Thanks so much, Charles, and also thanks for all your work in putting together the entire webinar series. As Charles mentioned, this is the continuation of a discussion and a sharing of information, putting things out there that hopefully are really practical and useful. We're going to shift gears a little bit and mix it up for today's session. As Charles mentioned, we brought a panel of experts together from Mexico, from San Francisco, from the UK, and I personally am in San Francisco. And what we're going to be talking about is the future of human resources in the wake of COVID-19. Now, what does that mean? You know, there are so many different external events happening. What we've done is put together a series of questions for the panelists to address, and I'm gonna, as the moderator, my job is to encourage our panelists to be provocative, to go deep, to be really practical, and address these questions and be futuristic in their responses. We're going to be following up, with contact information for everybody. Let's go ahead. And then we're going to finish the session with a Q&A. So we're going to save that last 15 minutes of the panel discussion to include questions from the participants today. And I would encourage you to start thinking, especially as panelists are giving their answers and interacting with each other, debating and fighting, hopefully. Not really, but submit your questions, through the question tool on the webinar or through the chat. We'd love to start to address them, collect them, and if we can't get to them today, we will be following up, with some answers and putting you in touch with the right person to get you the resources that you're looking for. So I want to move right into getting to our first question, but before I do, let me just introduce our panelists, Karen, Dora, and Martin. Their titles, there's their email addresses, their LinkedIns, all of this is going to be available to you in the post-webinar package. So feel free, I'd really encourage everybody to connect with Karen, Dora, and Martin on LinkedIn. Think about them as a resource to you. They are Humantelligence partners and friends, and we absolutely, love what they're bringing, to their clients, to, the HR space, and would really encourage you to do that. Let's go ahead and turn the slides off and reveal who's having a good hair day or not. Oh, there's Dora. Hello. All right, Martin, Karen, awesome. All right, now I can't see myself, so you guys can see three people. I just want to check. Okay, so everyone can see each other but not themselves. All right, good. It's not like Zoom is a little bit different, when you're in gallery view. Okay, so first off, let me just do a couple of quick introductions to Dora, Martin, and Karen, and I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm not going to rattle off their bio or anything, but I'm just going to share with you a little bit about what I know about them. Okay. Martin, I work with really closely. He's a Humantelligence partner in the UK. He actually runs our business in the UK and develops business. Martin is a strategist. Okay, so he comes at problems from an extremely strategic, long tail perspective. He's always the guy who says, that's a symptom, not the problem. Let's get at the real problem. And I love how Martin does that. He is a maverick and a creative in his motivators, which those are Humantelligence personas, which I share. He's also an architect in the way that he goes about his work. That's his work style. And I also share that. Okay, so Martin and I share the same personas in the way that we approach work. So it's not surprising that we have, we're often on the same page, about approaching, the things that we're working on. And I really appreciate his perspective. I'm going to give Martin a chance to plug anything that he'd like to plug, but I'll next want to go to Dora. Dora is a Humantelligence partner down in Mexico. She has her own business in Mexico and Latin America. Dora is also a maverick and a creative, so we share those values, or what we call motivators, but she's a go-getter in her style. So something that I've learned about Dora is she can juggle so many plates at one time. I don't know how she does it. I also know that she's a voracious reader and lifelong learner. So what I'm expecting to hear from Dora today is probably some really good nuggets and recommendations about some books or resources that you might want to take a closer look at, because I think she probably reads 2 or 3 books at a time and is constantly staying up to date. Karen, my colleague here in San Francisco, is a friend of Humantelligence, a renowned expert on organizational culture. She's done it internationally. She's done it for big organizations, for startups. And she brings a very, very practical step-by-step approach to how do you build an organizational culture that aligns with your business strategy. That's what she does every day. That's her passion. And, by the way, she's sort of as far as, our personas and kind of our point of view, what we think of as our biases, because we all have biases. What I just told you, I just told on myself and Dora and Martin about our biases. Karen is more of a scholar, okay? So she approaches things, she researches it. She makes sure that it's right. She can reference every peer-reviewed journal article you want to know about these topics, and she comes to the table prepared. She also happens to teach a course at Stanford University on the topic of company culture. So I'm delighted to have Karen here with her perspective. So why don't we just jump right into it? All right, and let's go to the first question. Unless anybody, well, first, before we go there, Martin, Karen, or Dora, is there anything that you want to say about yourself, or, was I off track, or do you want to give a little more color on how I described you?
I think you did great.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You did great. I couldn't have put it better myself. In fact, I wouldn't have put it as well as that.
Okay, good. Well, Karen, if you're good with it too, let's go on to the first question. All right, here we go, panelists. All right, so our first question has to do with working remote. This is our topic, in our series. So let's get right into it. Let's start thinking about the future of remote work. And when I think about remote work, just to frame this, I'm thinking about 6, 12, 18 months into the future, okay? I know, for example, a company we work with, Coca-Cola, is keeping their entire US workforce remote through the end of 2020. They're not even going to be thinking about bringing people back into the office until next year. And that seems to be a theme. So what are those plans out there for employers in their approach to return to work? Do you agree that there's going to be a significant continuation of remote work, or do you have a different take? Secondly, I'm going to put this out there too. How can we as HR professionals and service providers to our businesses ensure that our remote workers are staying productive in the remote work culture? Let me just toss it out there. Martin, why don't you go?
Okay, yeah, I'll take this one. Happy to. Yeah, I think, I have a few points to make on this topic. But first of all, I think it's important to just get a sense of perspective, I think, of where we are. Yeah, the first point I want to make on that is that, with around 60% of all jobs just can't be done remotely, can't be done from home. Chefs, firefighters, pilots, factory workers, construction workers. I'm sure we can all think about many of the jobs that cannot be done remotely. Yeah, so for those people, when their workplaces are open, the challenge is going to mainly be around how we social distance, or whether even, social distancing is even possible. Now, if you look at Tesla's plan to reopen its factory in California and the one in Nevada, that is a very chunky document, but it's very much geared towards the physical tasks and separation to reduce the transmission risk of COVID-19. Yeah. And for those businesses, I would expect that they will carry on the burden of physical separation until they really don't have to. They've got to function as best they can, until we see a vaccine or an early intervention therapeutic drug. And then I think the issue will largely diminish from their perspective. Although I do have to say that many employers will be judged on what they did or didn't do for their staff in this unprecedented time. There will be a scorecard of employers out there. People will know which employers have behaved well and which have behaved badly. Yeah. So then there are about 40% of jobs that in full or in part could have a remote working element to them. Yeah, and broadly, let's call those office jobs. Yeah. So what do I see has happened and what do I expect to happen with those? Well, I think we've adjusted the time frame on a number of trends that we were already sort of well in the throes of. You know, we speeded up the adoption of technology that assists with interaction, you know, your Zoom, your WebEx, whatever your preferred video tech is. Yeah, but the key area that we probably jeopardized is that flagship office location. You know, there was a trend to push functions out of the city center, you know, whilst the senior people maintained their position to manage the image of the corporation, which is really what a flagship office in the center of a city is about. Yeah, but really we have seen a trend in that. So the trend that we were seeing in that was an increase in person density. So over the last 20 years, yeah, we've gone from around, I think it's 3 people per 1,000 square feet in an office to 6 per 1,000. So, you know, we've put people, you know, much closer together. Yeah. And in the short term, of course, that is not going to be possible. In the short term, we can expect more space around us in the office, which I think, you know, most people would say would be a good thing. Yeah. But will this change stick in the long term? And that's when we get on to the people side of it, I think, you know, because we know, you know, from prior research, around a quarter of people love working from home, about a quarter of people hate it, and around half like some kind of hybrid. Yeah. However, of everybody, nearly everybody universally hates a commute. Yeah. So the city center office has a challenge on its hands. Yeah, those who love working from home now certainly have a strong argument for it, you know, which they didn't have before. Yeah, as long as productivity is positive. Of course, some tasks and some jobs lend themselves better to remote working than others, and I think it's important to understand it from a job and task perspective. If you're a writer, then, you know, doing anything other than working wherever you please is an anathema. Yeah, but if we over embrace remote working, yeah, I do think we will lose something in team working. Yeah, research says we do work better and harder when we're in a group. Yeah, for example, in a study of rowers in the UK, researchers noticed that when they trained on their own, yeah, those rowers, yeah, their pain threshold was half that of when they trained as a group. Yeah, they gave up quicker when they worked by themselves, when they trained by themselves. And this is also apparent in individual tasks as well, not just in group tasks. Because in another sports study, yeah, this time of rugby players, yeah, rugby is very much a sort of British, South African, Australian, New Zealand, Argentinian, you know, French, Italian sport, for those who don't know. Yeah, but it's a team sport. That rugby players, when they analysed those, the results showed that while they were doing individual sprints, yeah, when a player warmed up with a teammate, yeah, they had 6% faster times than when they warmed up individually. So, you know, that human interaction we can very easily lose. And I think that the challenge, yeah, for companies will be whoever can capture team working aspects, yeah, will have a significant competitive advantage. Yeah, if you're committed to remote working, yeah, you really are going to have to focus on your teams, yeah, and how they work together. That is going to be the key to successful remote working. If you look at it purely from the cost side, you're certainly going to lose something in the team working and the collaboration side.
Martin, I had some things to add to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So just great statistics, by the way. I was copiously taking notes. I thought I'd share another study that came out recently. It's a small study, but it had in-depth interviews conducted on top of that. And what they found is the average productivity loss of remote work has only been about 1 to 2%. And so I'm talking about largely office workers, because I think you're right. There's certain jobs that can't be done from home, but for the 40% that can be done, their productivity on average has only been impacted 1 to 2%. And 40% of those 40% would prefer to work remotely full-time in the future. Now, in this whole debate around, is it good or is it bad? Is it the same or the different? Is it different? Is it going to impact productivity, et et cetera. I think it really does impact culture, and I think there should be culture work around ensuring that a company culture is strong no matter what format work happens, whether people are together or apart. I feel very strongly about that. And so, you know, of those 40%, I think the future now is going to be choice. I think the thing that can't be taken back is the possibility that people can work from home. So the companies that were, you know, so hard about whether or not people should be in the office or not, they had no choice about it. And so now you can't take that away. And now in the future, employees will expect to have the option, regardless of whether what the rules and policies are, they would want the option in the future, that flexibility. So I think those are the things that are changing as a result of what's been happening.
Yes, and just to complement a little bit about what you both said, I really think that remote work is here to stay, as you both said. And as everything, it has its pros and cons. And people have reported also to have more time for their families, for themselves, rather than being maybe driving or on a plane. In terms of productivity, it all turns down to culture and technology. First, we all know that it's the first time in history that technology is advancing faster than employment. And if we don't have the right technology in our company, from talent searching, onboardings, offboardings, the complete cycle, I find it hard to ensure productivity in a remote work environment. Now, there is another thing, the micromanagement. The lack of technology and the right rituals or process in your organization can cause even more stress to the employees. So I think that's something that we need to ensure productivity is the right technology, the right rituals of your company, clear roles and objectives. I suggest if you don't have any method, there's a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr, the OKRs, Objectives and Key Results, which is great to really drive productivity in the workplace. Carrie?
I guess it's better if I go off mute. Okay. No wonder you weren't hearing my acknowledgments. Okay. Anyway, I think these are awesome points, you know, especially around individual productivity and the autonomy and the option that employers are going to have to offer. There's a certain expectation that's shifted in kind of the social contract, you know, between employers and job seekers. And that's going to have to be addressed in order to compete for that talent. That's going to have to be part of the equation. Secondly, I think Martin made an excellent point about teamwork. The research that I've seen around teamwork driving innovation, and that idea that it's casual encounter that often drives the, you know, the innovation engine in a culture. That's difficult to sort of codify, you know, and have come to life on Zoom, if you will. And so that's the innovation drivers inside a culture, I think, is going to be something that organizations just overall are going to have to start looking at more closely. So that's just kind of my take. But let's move on to the next question. And Charles, I know you're going to show the question on the screen. All right. As the screen refreshes. Okay. So the question is, which HR functions and processes have been adversely affected by COVID-19, and which will have a higher profile in the future as a result? You know, I think we talked a lot about the impact of COVID-19, the need for social distance, the remote work trends, which has natural implications for how HR is going to need to serve the organization and the investments that HR is going to need to make. So what should HR be concentrating on to get ready to support their businesses in a new environment? Dora, why don't you take that one to start?
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. And more than affected, I see it more as an opportunity for HR. As an HR consultant in Mexico, I try to implement a pilot to home office in different companies. And the answer was, no, our company can never work remote. But thanks for the idea. That's awesome. And I have seen the companies were very afraid of changing, and they wanted to keep safe and wanted to like do things the way they know that works for them. But COVID-19, I think that has opened their eyes in seeing, at least in Mexico, that they can hire talent worldwide. Now, for the employees, there is also a challenge because now they must compete also worldwide for talent. Because when you graduated, you'll say like, okay, well, how many engineers were graduated from this university? Well, now you're competing all around the globe. And as Brené Brown says, we are wired to connect. So we as human beings really need to be connected to one another. And this is a real challenge working remotely, as Martin said earlier. HR must focus also on data analysis, HR analysis, correlations, understanding the true passion of the employees. If someone is doing what they love, we all know that the value that it has to the company is huge. So go back to your rituals, as I said earlier. If you don't have them, start them today. And don't let the culture figure it out by itself. Rather, take control with the C-suite and understand the new role or real direction that the company will take if they decide to reinvent themselves in this COVID-19. Also, what I see is that if you're in HR, it's like a great time to be alive because there is a lot of work that must be done. First, you have to understand that in some things we must unlearn to learn. So HR must be training employees in how to work remotely. Don't assume that everyone knows how to work or know the rules about working remotely. Look for new ways of hiring, also freelancers, crowd workers, super jobs. I think super jobs is going to be the new way of working, which is working with AI, a person working with AI, and there's numerous examples about that. Rather than having the old job description that if I ask you right now, when was the last time you went to your job description and saw what you had to do, you'll still probably say you don't even know your job description. Better understand the roles that the employee must fit and do. Now, nobody goes and check, right? So I think that if you're going to the office, make sure that also all your employees are safe, because sometimes like we want to go back to the office, but you don't have all the requirements. And I think that if you're planning to go back to the office in our companies, we decided also, as the example that you were saying earlier, we're not coming back until maybe 2021. And if you do have to go to the office, you have to follow some protocols. So I think that we have to face this new reality and make sure that all of our employees are safe also.
That's great. How about any other takes on where HR needs to focus? And I want to kind of move us along in the conversation. So this might be something that you could be thinking about over the next few minutes, because our last question is about your best advice for HR right now. So unless anybody have any reactions to what Dora talked about?
Yeah, I think I can maybe just add a little something. I mean, I think there are a number of functions that HR will have to keep a very close eye on, and that will change in the new environment. You know, if we accept that remote working is here to stay, there will be more choice for the employee, and we're going to rely more on technology. I think that there are going to be challenges in areas such as training a completely new employee. We mentioned already about culture. You know, it's much more difficult to engage in a culture when you're sitting at home than if you're actually in the inside the identity of the business. So that will be a challenge. So, you know, and from that, therefore, you also get onto the engagement side of things. I think there's a danger that employees, unless it's really worked on, you know, as both Karen and Dora said, you've got to start looking at culture, you've got to start thinking about engagement. There's in danger that employees become attached to the job yeah, and disconnect from the identity of the business, which means that they will then, their job becomes much more portable and can go from business to business as long as the job is the same. You know, if everybody's offering remote work, I mean, at the moment, if you offer remote work to a big section of the population, you know, that is a big draw for them, and they will stay a long time because of that, because there are very few choices. Well, now that home worker or that remote worker is going to have more choices. So, you know, as I've already mentioned, for me, it's about the team working. I think we will lose something in the familiarity side of things. It is more difficult to connect over Zoom. You know, you look at the research, for example, that NASA did in 1986 with pilots. You know, what they found was that pilots who didn't know each other, didn't have a connection, hadn't flown together before, made more errors in the cockpit than pilots that were fatigued. Yeah, so familiarity is really a big issue. We know that when you throw sports teams together, if they don't really know each other very well, yeah, they perform badly. Yeah, but, you know, plenty of research out there in the auditing side of things, consulting side of things, and in coding to say, you know, that when teams work together for longer and get to know each other better, yeah, they perform better. So, you know, I think HR departments have to start thinking about how do we get these people to know each other better so that they can work better.
Gee, we might have a solution for that, Martin. Anyway.
I wasn't thinking of that, Kerry.
Let's move right into our next topic, and I want to jump into what's happening out there in the world. If you turn your television on, you know, clearly, let's see here, and we can see if Charles can.
Yeah, and Kerry, just one logistical thing real quick.
Yeah.
I've got a handful of the audience is asking me to keep the slides up because the videos are on the side of their screen, so they can still see the videos, but they want to see the questions too. So I'm going to leave the slides up
sure.
with the question.
That's fine. Yeah, thanks for calling that out. We want to make this really, it's for you. So let's move on to the next question. We're gonna. I think we've talked about the changing culture, and you know we can come back around to it, but I want to move on to our question about racial inequality. Let's see, is it refreshing? Okay, here we go. So clearly, you know, many people of all backgrounds in many countries in our communities are calling for systemic reform, you know, in all different ways. You know, there are different labels for it. There's different opinions about it. And clearly HR, you know, kind of as the owners of employment brand, culture, employee engagement, inclusive practices, primarily. What advice do you have for HR about addressing the issue of racial inequality? And Karen, I'm gonna ask you to take the lead on this one.
Sure. I know you mentioned all the national differences and all that, and we have a lot of multinational companies as well. So I think those are all subject to everything that's going on around the world. I think collectively, there's a reckoning going on. And in the business world, it's the difference between what a company says and what it does. So if you're doing any sort of social listening on social media, particularly around the Black Lives Matter movement in the US, where companies are taking stands and releasing public statements, and if those are not authentic, their very own employees or former employees are calling them out on it. So my best advice is a few things. First is you can't ignore it. No company can ignore it. And it's not just, I think it's naive to think that everything that's going outside is not impacting what's going on inside. So you can't ignore it because it's right in there in front of you. It's also the right thing to do, right? So the first thing I would say is figure out and commit to addressing these social challenges, okay? And the second is to listen and learn first, okay? And I think then you do action. But if you saw in the news last week, there are some companies that rushed to implementation, created these town halls and forums that really devolved into very unproductive and toxic interactions, and it made the news. So this is a time to actually listen and learn first. And remember that it's not about us, it's about others. And if everybody is thinking that way, then we're all going to win at the end of the day. The third thing would be that when you do take action, that it's expertly facilitated. So don't just shoot from the hip, because this is sensitive, complex stuff that we're dealing with. And to just check off the box and say you did something is just asking for trouble, in my opinion. The fourth thing is to engage in community and empathy-driven co-design. And what I mean by that is to be able to bring together all the members of the system that creates a business. And I'm talking about leadership, employees, customers, the community that they're within, the civic organizations, public and private sectors that all touch that company, and to come together to co-create a shared future, a shared positive future. And my own framework, Design of Work Experience, which is the core of my book, is one methodology you can use to do that. I've been very much inspired by appreciative inquiry, for those of you that have heard of it as well. If not, please look into it. But it's important that you're bringing together parties that are typically us versus them, and to bring them together in an us with them scenario. That's the only way systematic change can happen, in my opinion. And then, of course, the last two steps, which a lot of people tend to forget, is implement and sustain, especially that last one. So if you're going to execute all these strategies and plans and systems, that you need to make sure that everything's done to sustain it, set the conditions by which this becomes the new stage, the new normal, and that you can build off of it in the future. So that's my best advice for tackling these issues within the company, because here's the thing, the companies are being torn. I was talking to a business last week, and they are a law firm where it's like they have to run their business every day. They have to keep the bus running, and then they have this obligation to respect that their employees need time to also volunteer, do civic duties, protest even. And then how do you maintain business continuity when there are things going on outside this world that are impacting your employees? Very much so. Or even entire groups of employees who are sick and can't perform their jobs. What does the company do then? So it takes this kind of strategic view that brings together all the wonderful knowledge and perspectives within a current system to be able to innovate towards something different than what maybe has happened before. So I hope that's kind of at least a few little steps that an organization can think about doing. I would recommend it in that sequence, but but think about taking some sort of action as opposed to nothing. That's the worst thing to do right now.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that perspective. Something that I like, and I'm going to actually ask Martin and Dora about something on this topic. I recently read an author talking about diversity and inclusion, and what he said was diversity and inclusion. Our organizations don't have a diversity and inclusion problem. We have a culture problem.
Yep.
And diversity and inclusion is an outcome that results from the right kind of culture shift. So I like that kind of as an approach, because culture is a systemic thing for an organization, and it has lots of moving parts. But let me go to Dora. I know you're in Mexico. Martin, you're in the UK. Share with us what are some of those regional differences, Dora? What's going on in Mexico when it comes to this topic?
Well, I think that we see more advance in the US and the UK. In here in Mexico, talking about culture sometimes is seen as a second thing to talk about. And In this question in particular, I see it more as for Mexico particularly, I see it more as an upstream initiative. Downstream solves problems that have already happened, and upstream prevents those problems from happening. So I really recommend the book. It's called Upstream, How to Solve Problems Before They Happen, from Dan Heath. It's really a must read these days because it actually tells you how can you prevent and of course it's for the long run. You don't want, because sometimes I go to companies and they'll say like, oh, can you help us? We want to shift our company next month. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think we can do that for you. Like, and also something that is very important that in Mexico some CEOs don't see it this way is everything that the CEO and the C-suite does, all the people will do it exactly the same, because the culture is what the people do when you're not there. So I think that it is very important to set those rules, or as I said earlier, the rituals that you want your company to have in order to have the culture that you're driving or looking for your company. So I think that in Mexico, there's a lot of work to be done here. And also, I think that this book gives a lot of perspective of how to do things upstream. For example, in 1989 in Mexico, they made an initiative it's called Hoy No Circula, or no Circulation Day. And only if your plate of your card has a number, you could use that card that day, because they want for Mexicans to use more public transportation and also to lower the air pollution. Of course, that didn't happen. What people did is they bought another car, and it was actually not a new one. So good actions don't always bring good solutions. So I think that we have to focus really on what we want, measure it, and stick with it. Because if we want immediate results that sometimes the company wants, like today, tomorrow, we want a new culture. Now let's put this in the culture. Let's put this in the company. I think that it's not going to happen that way if you don't put it as a ritual. It's like if you go to an NFL game and they're always singing the national anthem. It's not like if they have time to put on the US national anthem. They do it by heart. You brush your teeth by heart. You have those rituals. That's what companies need. Company needs rituals to maintain a great culture.
How about you, Martin?
Yeah, I think I would say that we are in a very similar place to the US. I think the relationship nationally with the police, and I mean this on an aggregated basis, is probably a little better than it seems to be looking from the outside of the US. But we have the same fundamental problems, but we also have reacted in a similar way nationally. Yeah, all of our cities, our major cities, biggest towns have all seen demonstrations. And they've kept going just the same as ways they have done in the US. They've not been sort of a one-night stand, being continued. And the discussion is being taken, I think, very seriously here. What I see here from an HR perspective is a real opportunity to contribute to the fabric of the organization like I've never seen before. I have never seen more support for any kind of change more profoundly and deeper than I am seeing right now. This is a keystone moment from my working life of 25 years so far. So we've never had a better chance to move things forward at a rapid pace. So my advice is embrace the pace that we have right now. Embrace it, adopt it, and be the change. As sort of Karen said, this is an everybody issue. Yeah. And I also agree, that what I don't see is that this will be something which is in the news cycle now and will then die away quietly after a while. Yeah, I can easily see this being a key feature in this year's presidential election in the US. Yeah, so we can expect both candidates to address it and to make commitments in this area. Yeah. So as Karen said, I wholeheartedly agree with the statement. Yeah, do not ignore this issue. Yeah, get ahead of it. Be the person with the ideas. There is huge opportunity out there. Yeah, it won't be acceptable to do nothing. Hope that all we ever do is talk about it. This does have to move to action, And I think there's enough momentum behind this that we will see actions. And again, I think this is an area where employers will get judged. Yeah, already we're seeing, the guys at the top writing checks, for other organizations to give money to. Well, as soon as I see that, I think, what about your organization? What does your organization look from the inside? Yeah, so I think, we've got a huge opportunity here. Let's not talk about it too long. Yeah, let's move forward with it and keep the momentum. Yeah, because I think, the streets out there right now are not very patient. Yeah, I think we have to respond to that impatience as well.
Yeah, that urgency. Let's move on to our last question. And thanks for that perspective. I think it's great. All right, so this is the last one, and we're past our time. Charles, I'm not sure if we've got any questions that have rolled in, but I definitely want to leave plenty of room. So I'm going to keep this one brief. Okay,
yeah,
this is the time. Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Just for your knowledge, we have 5 questions. 3 of them appear to be pretty short questions that I can certainly answer. And then we do have that one poll after this slide. So just so you know where we're at.
All right, so we're going to do this. This is the lightning round. Okay, so out of everything we've talked about so far, I like this idea that the future is now, right? COVID kind of made it happen maybe sooner than we were ready for, but it's now. And so we've talked about lots of different things. What about the new future of work that people might find surprising? And here's the question: what's the one pitfall that HR should avoid moving forward? And let's keep it real brief. Your best advice.
Shall I take this one first?
Go ahead, Martin.
Okay, yeah. So quickly as I can, I think the companies consist of 3 things. Yeah, products, processes, and people. Yeah, we try to tackle these issues around the people. Yeah, and I think that that's very much where you'll get to in the heart of it. But there are quick wins out there. Yeah, it's in the processes. Companies run on processes. Yeah. And one of the biggest problems we have as human beings is our propensity for natural bias, as you mentioned earlier, Kerry. The long and the short of it is the more you allow humans to make a decision or a choice in a data-sparse environment, the more you will see bias. Yeah? And the place where I think there will be high expectations in HR and where HR will particularly be getting looked at is in recruitment. Yeah, the recruitment and talent acquisition functions control the gates, the entry gates to a company. Everybody in the company passes through those gates. And it's in those recruitment processes and any lack of integrity in them that have significantly contributed to putting us where we are now. Yeah, I know a lot of talent acquisition and recruitment people don't want to hear that, but it's unfortunate. Everybody knows there is bias in recruitment. Yeah, there's a ton of research specifically in that arena. Yeah, and I don't see a lot of the research being acted on. Yeah, I expect there'll be a push to remove and control bias inside processes. The obvious place to go first is recruitment. Yeah, even if that's not legislated, a lot of recruitment processes around compliance. Yeah, so this is a massive opportunity. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to finish off just give me one more second. Yeah, so there's a massive opportunity for people in recruitment to raise their profile, contribute, lead through this environment. If you struggled before to get a seat at the top table, now is your opportunity. It's never been better. And I think you also have to change the focus on where they're going with tech. A lot of the tech is around doing things faster and not around higher quality or performance. Yeah, and that should change. So essentially going forward, it'll be more science, more data, less subjectivity, less opinion.
Excellent. How about you, Dora?
Yes,
10
well,
seconds.
as Martin says, I think recruitment is very important this day. I would say reskilling must be a top priority for HR. Reskilling, yes. This year in Davos, they actually launched an initiative called Reskilling Revolution, better skills, better jobs, better education for 1 billion people by 2030, with the purpose to train 1 billion people in these new technologies. It is estimated that around 75 million jobs will be displaced due to automation and technological integration in the next years. But the good news is this transformation will also create around 133 million new jobs. So I think if we don't train our employees and even ourselves in new technologies and new ways of working, we will be seeing a crisis due to these technological advances in a few years.
Excellent. Oh, that's awesome. How about you, Karen?
Yeah, so I'll give a vision and then I'll give you the pitfall. I have a side project called newhr.com, which is a future of work platform for thought leadership around that space, particularly for HR. And for everything that's been going on, we put out a post-racial view of the future of work. And the 6 conditions are responsible leaders, meaningful cultures for all, the opportunity to develop and grow, to work-life integration, unparalleled innovation and progress if you are leveraging diversity, and private and public sectors collaborating for the greater good. That's the vision. And I think that post-racial or not, I think the next future of work should have those conditions. And the pitfall I would give to HR, and I say this because I grew up in HR, is that we need to avoid as an industry the short-sightedness that we tend to have because we're too busy running a business. We need to be strategic. And I think by now you've all seen that the big theme here is culture. So be strategic, especially about culture. And I'm just gonna put a quick plug in. I have the last 2 days to register for my class at Stanford, which is Achieve Competitive Advantage Through Company Culture. So if you want to learn how to do this, that's a great opportunity. It's a very cost-effective way of doing it as well. So I just wanted to put that there. Yeah.
And let's do this, and Charles can do this as a follow-up to our the people who signed up and participated today. Let's include a link in the follow-up to newhr.com. I love that resource.
Thank you.
Also a link to your Stanford course, because it's less than $600 for an 8-week, curriculum. It brings the good stuff about exactly how to do culture step by step. And Karen is the expert on that. So really encourage anybody who can spend some more time on Zoom in the evenings, to go ahead and do that. It's a virtual course. Okay, so there is a poll question, and I also we just have 6 minutes left. So Charles, I want to just ask for your guidance here. You see the questions from the participants, the attendees. Do you feel like we should address any of those because they're really important, or should we go to the poll question and kind of wrap up with the questions?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just launch the poll, and then we'll just zoom through this really quick. And then I've got 6 questions from the audience, so we need to address those in 5 minutes that we've got left. So I'll quick launch this, and we'll give everybody 30 seconds. How about that?
All right, click everybody.
All right, should be launching right now. Sometimes it takes a couple of seconds to actually show up on your screen. We'll give it 15 more seconds here.
How aligned is your HR function to the future direction of the business? Are you totally aligned because you have a DeLorean time machine? Are you on track to meet the future needs when it arrives? You feel like you could get there, but you need some help, whether that's help from your leadership or help externally, or are you out of sync? You just have a lot of work to do in this area.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results here. Carrie, feel free to read those off there quickly.
Yeah, so the predominant result is about half say we could get there with some help. I think that's encouraging, given all the uncertainty about predicting the future. Quarter say on track to meet the future when it arrives. And this is actually kind of surprising. I wasn't expecting almost, a sixth, of the group, a fifth to a sixth of the group to say it's really out of sync. So there are lots of opportunities, and I want to reiterate, the positive message here, just to wrap it up, that and what I heard in the best advice, from our panelists today: blow up your talent acquisition function, change the gates to the organization, remove bias, use data, take a strategic perspective. Now is the opportunity to move from being an administrative function to be a strategic business partner. And human resources has been asking for this for years, if not decades. This is a major opportunity. And I forgot the last one. So let's move on to the questions from the attendees.
Okay. All right. So we'll just rapid fire through a handful of these. The first one is there was a book that was named earlier related to productivity, but they didn't catch the title. I think Dora or who was the one that actually mentioned that one earlier?
Yes, it's called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. Measure What Matters by John Doerr, D-O-E-R-R.
Okay, cool. Okay, then there's quite a few questions about things that we're going to send out after the webinar. I've mentioned at the beginning that we'd send out 4 or 5 things, but I think there's a need from the audience to get, like, for example, Karen, everybody wants your steps that you mentioned earlier. There's some questions about your Stanford course from the audience. So I think if it's okay, I'll connect you directly with those people. And then, if I could maybe get a list of those steps, then I can send those out in my follow-up. So
I hope I remember everything I said.
we've got to record
now
it.
Now I remember the third thing. Now I remember the third thing. Reskilling. Get strategic, reskill, change talent acquisition. Okay. That's it. Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, let me see here. Dora, so this question's for you, and I'll give you like 30 seconds of floor time here to answer it. But what is your opinion? In your opinion, what are the main competencies that top managers must have to establish an upstream culture?
Well, that's a very interesting question. For being an upstream or for a leader to be an upstream. Upstream is something that it's not imposed to you. You choose to do an upstream project because it takes a lot of time to do it. So I think that a person must be they must know exactly what the goal is. Go to that. For example, if you don't know what project do you want to solve yet, I think that the first step is to know what do you want to do and where do you want to get. So I think problem solver, number 1, if we talk about the personas. Number 2, I think also researcher. Look for the information that's there, but not the one that it's on the media and the one that you get usually right now on the first things of Google. Go deeper. So research is another one. Also the patience, because if you're not patient with the project, I think that you will drop out very easily. The solutions will not be very fast. They're not going to be coming fast, so you have to be very patient. So I think that the leaders must be first, as I told you, know what the goal is. Also, the thing of research, that you have to be look for what the information that's already there, and also if you want, also the patient, because it takes a lot of time to make major and generational changes. Hope you read the book because it's awesome. They have a lot of examples there of the U.S. and Norwegian and everything.
Excellent. Thanks for that.
Perfect. So we're gonna stop there. There's a couple of questions that we didn't get to about some of our topics earlier. That's okay. We'll reach out to you with those answers. And for everybody who asked for follow-up materials, we're gonna go ahead and just send a bunch of links after this. So I apologize if there's like 7 or 8 different links to different things in that follow-up email, but they're requested by the audience, so we'll definitely go ahead and do that for you. So I want to first off, thank Dora and Karen and Martin, I really appreciate all of you coming on today. And Carrie, I don't know if you have any final words, but I really appreciate you coming on and doing a great job with our moderating today as well. So if you have anything to throw in there, I'll give you the floor for a moment.
Thanks, Charles. I just want to thank the attendees. I really hope that this was what we promised, which was being on point, being fearless about the topics that we're tackling, and that it was practical for you. So, I hope to see you on the next webinar when we have a chance. And I think that's a wrap.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you all for coming to our panel today. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Martin. It was a pleasure.
Nice
Thank
nice
you.
meeting everyone. Take care.
Thank you all.